Recently, there's been a lot of concern online about Instagram supposedly shadow banning certain types of content. A lot of that talk has to do with far-right personalities, and some of them have in fact been outright banned of late. But it turns out that Instagram is also cracking down on other types of content, and that is getting far less conversation. Joining us now to talk about that is tech reporter for HuffPost, Jesslyn Cook. Welcome to the Damage Report.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. I very much enjoyed your write-up about this. And so it has to do with Instagram cracking down on what it calls either inappropriate or sexually suggestive content. Now, in your research, do we have any idea of what those terms actually mean as they're being employed by Instagram?
No, Instagram said it would start banning or demoting inappropriate content. The only example it gave users was sexually suggestive content. So I reached out to Instagram directly asking, can you define inappropriate? Can you define sexually suggestive? They said no. I said, can you please give me a comment explaining why you won't define those terms? And they said no.
Okay, so I get their fear, I suppose, because the more on the record they are, the more easy it will be to point out inconsistencies in how they employ it. But as you raised in your piece, as soon as they start to identify a couple of things that we know you can't do, you can't show bare genitals or something like that on Instagram, but we know that there's a lot that you can do. So when they say sexually suggestive, how do they differentiate between a shot of someone in lingerie designed to sexually arouse and a shot of a person in a bikini that covers exactly as much of that person's body, or in sports gear that might also show a lot of skin? How do they differentiate between those things? Do we have any idea?
It's a really good question. And a lot of people, a lot of users who rely on Instagram to promote themselves, to promote their work, would love answers to that question because they're afraid of having their content suppressed from Instagram's Explore page, which is where its algorithms raise posts that could be of interest to other users.
And so you sort of got into the area that I'm interested in. Obviously, there are a lot of people that use Instagram just for fun, as a social network, whatever. But there's also people that, whether they produce a particular type of art or they're models or sex workers of various forms, there are possibly severe economic consequences to this sort of policy. So in terms of the shadow bans that are going on, and also the lack of willingness of Instagram to specifically define what is allowed and what is not allowed, how is that impacting different forms of sex work and things like that on Instagram?
Yeah, I spoke to a number of sex workers who either had their accounts deleted entirely and then restored after appealing multiple times through the app, but who are also afraid of having their content suppressed because that's how they promote. Like one woman I spoke to does erotic illustrations. They are not in violation of Instagram's policy. She doesn't show female nipples. She doesn't show genitals. But she is really nervous about having her content suppressed because that's how she draws people to her artwork and that's how she makes a living.
And there have been a few cases recently where we've seen as progressively some of the more far right personalities that have been banned from places like YouTube, sometimes from Facebook, they retreat to Twitter or to Instagram, and then now they've been banned off of those things. If you're a sex worker and suddenly you find yourself unable to use Instagram in that way, do we know what the alternatives are? Where do they move from if Instagram is not an option?
It is tough because Instagram is such a massive platform. It has more than 1 billion users. It's definitely ideal for these women who are looking to draw people to themselves, to their artwork, to their products. And so there are smaller alternatives popping up. In my article, I mentioned a platform called Lips that is a sex-positive website, a social networking site where women and others can embrace their sexuality without fear of censorship. But it certainly doesn't have the reach that a platform like Instagram has. So again, you're seeing these financial impacts for women who are either being banned from Instagram or feel like they can't be there because their content is no longer being promoted the way it used to be.
Yeah, I would imagine that, I mean, it's hard to come up with a platform that has the reach that Instagram does. And as you know, the low barrier to entry, the ease of spreading content and all of that, it's hard to come up with something like Facebook, I guess, has more users potentially, but it's not as easy necessarily to share things. I also found it interesting that in your piece you talk about what seemed to be trolls specifically hunting down these sorts of accounts to try to get them wiped out. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, that's a great example of the problem of having such vague, arbitrarily enforced policies because it really leaves these policies up to manipulation to silence women. So Jezebel did a great piece about a misogynistic troll who just spends his time looking for sex workers on Instagram and reports their accounts over and over and over again, as long as it takes until they disappear. And he says that he's been able to take down more than 300 pages. So I've spoken to a couple of the women who were targeted by this troll, and they said they did not violate Instagram's policies whatsoever. It's just he was able to get them removed by consistently reporting them.
That seems like the sort of person you want to spend time with at a party. So just some people's hobbies, man. There's a lot of great books I could recommend to this guy, because it's almost certainly a guy. I also wanted to ask one other thing. I know that there have been at various points, there have been social media protests, sometimes led by celebrities, to try to get Instagram to open up in this area and allow for more toplessness and things like that. Does it appear that there's any progress in that area? Have those efforts mostly stalled? What have you found?
Sarah Silverman, actually, in the last couple days, I believe she posted a topless photo on Instagram, just to kind of point out the hypocrisy that Instagram will allow male nipples, which serve no purpose whatsoever, and will not allow female nipples. Other platforms are like this too. Tumblr will not even allow female presenting nipples. So Sarah Silverman put up her photo. It was taken down. She's reposted another one in the last 24 hours where her nipples are blacked out. And so celebrity efforts have definitely drawn more attention to this issue, but it doesn't seem like Instagram is going to make any changes.
That is depressing. We live in an absurd world where this is still, the fact that you can see male, at least ban the male nipples too. Like, come on, honestly. But anyway, we do appreciate both your reporting and joining us here on the Damage Report, Jessalyn. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you again.
Thank you very much for watching this clip from the Damage Report. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and ring the bell on YouTube to get notifications of our new videos. And of course, you can catch the full Damage Report live every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific on TYT Network on YouTube TV.